The grand halls of Arinder Palace gleamed under the afternoon sun, gold leaf and polished marble reflecting centuries of royal legacy. Yet beneath the opulent beauty, a current of tension and deceit ran through the corridors like poison. Princess Elara Valen moved gracefully through the audience chamber, her silk gown trailing behind her. Every step was measured, every gesture precise, the perfect image of a royal heir. But her mind was anything but calm. For weeks, she had sensed a subtle shift in the court. Whispers behind closed doors, suspicious glances from trusted advisors, and unusual requests from her father, King Alaric, regarding sensitive negotiations with the neighboring kingdom of Vera. Most alarming of all was Lord Kaelan Dross, her closest advisor. To the court, he was loyal, intelligent, and protective of her every decision. But Elara's instincts, honed from years of political education and secret observation, whispered that Kaelan's loyalty was a fragile mask, hiding ambitions far darker than she could imagine. That evening, as candlelight flickered across the grand hall, Elara approached Kaelan under the pretense of reviewing trade agreements. "Kaelan," she said softly, keeping her tone casual, "I noticed several discrepancies in the proposed treaty with Vera. Could you clarify?" Kaelan smiled, the practiced warmth of a man who had spent decades mastering courtly deception. "Of course, Princess. It is merely a minor adjustment, nothing that should concern you. The kingdom's best interests are secure." Elara studied him, the slightest crease in his brow betraying a flicker of hesitation. "Minor adjustments can have major consequences," she murmured, letting her gaze linger. "I trust that all actions taken are for the good of Arinder, and not for any personal gain." Kaelan's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, so brief it could be mistaken for shadow. "You honor me with your concern, Your Highness," he said smoothly, bowing slightly. "I would never betray your trust." But Elara knew better. Later that night, she retreated to her private chamber, the weight of unease pressing on her chest. She walked to the balcony overlooking the palace gardens, where the moonlight spilled over perfectly trimmed hedges and statues of long-dead monarchs. A note had arrived earlier, slipped discreetly beneath her door. No seal, no signature. Only a single line. "Not all who serve you are loyal. Trust carefully." Her heart skipped, but her resolve hardened. She would not be a pawn. Not her family, not her kingdom, and certainly not herself. The first step would be to uncover the truth. Elara knew the palace held more secrets than corridors, more lies than tapestries, and that she had to navigate them with cunning sharper than any sword. Tomorrow, she would attend the council meeting where Vera's envoy would arrive. Kaelan would be there, smiling, advising, pretending loyalty. But Elara had a plan. Subtle, precise, and dangerous. If betrayal walks among you, the first strike must be unseen. And Princess Elara Valen was ready to see the shadows for what they truly were. The grand council chamber of Arinder Palace was alive with hushed conversations and the faint rustle of robes. Golden sunlight poured through stained glass windows, casting colored patterns across the polished marble floor. Princess Elara Valen entered with measured grace, her posture regal, yet her eyes were sharp and calculating. Today, the Veran envoy would be present, Lord Kaelric Dorn, a man known for his charm and dangerous intelligence. Rumors whispered that he had played kingdoms like chess pieces before, and Elara had learned from a young age that charm could be as lethal as a dagger. Kaelan Dross stood nearby, as expected, offering her a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Princess," he said smoothly, "the council awaits your guidance on the treaty terms." Elara inclined her head, but her attention was elsewhere. She scanned the room, observing every movement, every whisper. Subtle gestures often betrayed intentions. A flicker of hesitation, a too-quick glance, the stiffness of a bow. When Lord Kaelric entered, all eyes subtly shifted. He was tall, with sharp features softened by a carefully practiced warmth. His dark eyes swept the room with quiet confidence, and when they met Elara's, she felt a flicker of something unexpected. Recognition, curiosity, perhaps challenge. "Princess Valen," he said, bowing with understated elegance. "I am honored to meet you. Your reputation precedes you." Elara nodded, her voice calm. "The honor is mine, Lord Kaelric. May our kingdom's discussions be fruitful." The council meeting proceeded, but Elara's mind remained alert. She observed Kaelan closely, noticing the subtle way he occasionally intercepted documents, whispered suggestions, and exchanged fleeting glances with certain council members. Nothing overt, yet enough to suggest hidden maneuvering. During a break, she discreetly followed him down a corridor, careful to remain unseen. She watched as he paused outside a seemingly innocuous storage room, glancing around before slipping inside. Curiosity piqued, Elara waited a few moments before quietly entering after him. Inside, she found a stack of correspondence, letters sealed with Vera's insignia. Her eyes widened slightly as she scanned them. Plans, alliances, even instructions that directly undermined Arinder's interests. Kaelin's betrayal was no longer a whisper in the shadows. It was tangible, undeniable, and more dangerous than she had feared. He is conspiring with Vera to overthrow my family. Her heart pounded, but her expression remained composed. Panic was a luxury she could not afford. Every step from here required precision, cunning, and patience. That evening, in the privacy of her chamber, she spread the letters across her desk. The handwriting, the seals, the hidden codes, all pointed to a conspiracy carefully orchestrated over months. Kaelin had been the perfect advisor, masking treachery beneath loyalty. A knock at the door startled her. It was Lord Kaelric. "I hope I'm not intruding, Princess," he said, stepping inside cautiously. "I wish to speak privately." Elara studied him carefully. "You've been watching the council closely, Lord Kaelric. What is your purpose here?" He offered a small, enigmatic smile. Perhaps to offer guidance, or perhaps to see the truth that others wish to hide. Her pulse quickened. Could he be an ally, or yet another threat? Trust would have to be earned carefully. And enemies, even more so. Princess Elara Valen realized that the game had only just begun. The palace was a labyrinth of deceit, and she would need both courage and cunning to navigate it. The palace of Arinder never slept. Not truly. Even when night cloaked the marble towers and silenced the courtyards, secrets moved in the dark, whispered from one chamber to another like a dangerous lullaby. Princess Elara Valen stood before her mirror, her reflection calm and composed. Beneath the layers of silk and jewels, however, her heart burned with a cold determination. She had proof of Kaelin's betrayal, letters sealed with Vera's crest, written in his unmistakable hand. But proof alone meant nothing without power. And power, in a court like this, was never given. It was taken. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she commanded. The door opened to reveal Lord Kaelric Dorn. Tonight, he wore no diplomatic smile. His expression was grave, shadowed by the flickering candlelight. "I see you've uncovered something," he said quietly, his gaze flicking to the letters on her desk. Elara's spine straightened. "You seem remarkably well informed for a guest." "I make it a habit to know when danger is near," he replied evenly. "And, Princess, you are surrounded by it." Elara crossed her arms. "And how do I know you are not part of it?" Kaelric's lips curved slightly, not in amusement but in something sharper. "If I wished to harm you, Princess, I would have let your trusted advisor finish his work." Her breath caught. "You know about Kaelin?" "I know he has been feeding information to certain factions within Vera," Kaelric said. "But not all of Vera stands behind that plot." His tone softened slightly. "Some of us believe peace is still possible, if the right ruler leads it." Elara studied him, searching his face for deception. "And you think that ruler is me?" "I know it is," Kaelric said simply. The conviction in his voice startled her. For the first time, she saw not a manipulative envoy, but a man burdened by loyalty and choice. Still, trust was a fragile luxury. "I cannot move openly," Elara said after a long silence. "If I accuse Kaelin without solid backing, he'll twist the truth and destroy me before I can act." "Then you must play his game better than he does," Kaelric said. "Gather allies quietly. Find those whose loyalty lies not in gold or titles, but in you." Elara's mind raced. General Rowan, old, loyal to her late mother. Lady Seraphine, one of the few who had never bowed to Kaelin's influence. And perhaps Kaelric himself if she dared. Over the following days, Elara moved carefully through the palace. Each conversation, each glance, was a calculated move on the chessboard of power. With subtlety and poise, she began to gather her circle. General Rowan, who pledged his sword to her cause once more. Lady Seraphine, who offered eyes and ears among the nobility. And finally, Lord Kaelric, whose intelligence and insight proved invaluable, even if his motives remained wrapped in mystery. Together, they uncovered a deeper truth. Kaelin's plot was not limited to treason. He was preparing to invite Varen troops across the border, disguised as envoys for a peace treaty. Once inside Arinder's walls, the coup would begin. One night, in the palace library, Elara and Kaelrik met in secret. Candles burned low as they studied intercepted letters and maps. "When this begins," Kaelrik said, his voice low, "you must be ready to strike without hesitation. Mercy has no place in survival." Elara looked up, her eyes steady. "I've learned that already." He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary. "You've changed since the first council, Princess. There's steel in your voice now." "There had to be," she replied softly. "Because trust and innocence no longer protect me. Strategy does." Kaelrik's expression softened, and for the first time, warmth touched his features. "Then may your enemies learn too late just how dangerous you've become." As the candlelight flickered between them, a quiet understanding passed, born not of trust, but of necessity. And perhaps, beneath the sharp edges of survival, something fragile and forbidden began to stir. But Elara could not afford to dwell on it. The court was a battlefield, and the war for her kingdom's soul was only beginning. In the game of crowns, betrayal was currency, and Elara Valen had learned to spend it wisely. Dawn broke over the spires of Arinder Palace, gilding the rooftops in gold. But to Princess Elara Valen, it was not a sunrise, it was a warning. The next move in her dangerous game had begun. She stood by the window of her private study, eyes narrowed as she watched servants bustle below. Somewhere in those halls, her enemies whispered, plotting her downfall. But what they didn't know was that she was already watching them. In the past week, her quiet alliance had begun to bear fruit. General Rowan had discreetly shifted loyal guards into key posts around the palace. Lady Seraphine had uncovered several coded letters Kaelin had sent to the border, using merchant caravans as cover. And Lord Kaelrik, he had become her shadow, appearing when needed, vanishing when not, always one step ahead of danger. Elara had learned to value his insights, though his motives remained shrouded in mystery. There were moments when she caught him watching her, as though torn between duty and something deeper. That morning, he appeared again, unannounced, as always. "Your Highness," he greeted, bowing slightly, his dark cloak brushing the marble. "We've intercepted another message." Kaelin grows restless. "He suspects you're moving against him." Elara's expression didn't waver. "Good. Let him feel the edge of fear for once." Kaelrik allowed himself a faint smile. "He won't wait long to strike. And when he does, he'll find himself ensnared," she finished, stepping closer to the map spread across her desk. "By his own web." That evening, the palace hosted a lavish banquet, ostensibly to honor the alliance negotiations with Vera. But beneath the glittering chandeliers and flowing wine, betrayal simmered like poison in the air. Elara entered the grand hall draped in sapphire silk, a crown of delicate silver resting upon her hair. Every movement drew attention, every glance measured power. Kaelin greeted her with his usual charm, bowing low. "Your Highness," he murmured smoothly, "you look radiant this evening. I trust all is well." "All is as it should be," she replied with a serene smile, one that hid the storm beneath. Across the room, Kaelrik watched quietly, his gaze unwavering. When Elara's eyes met his, there was a flicker of unspoken understanding. Tonight, everything would begin. As the night deepened, Elara subtly gave the signal. Servants moved through the crowd with trays of wine, though a select few were loyal to her. Guards shifted positions, closing subtle exits. And from behind the scenes, Lady Seraphine whispered coded orders to waiting messengers. Kaelin, oblivious to the trap, raised his glass to toast the future of Arinder and Vera's partnership. "To peace," he declared. "To truth," Elara countered softly. Then, before the echo of her words faded, the palace doors swung open. General Rowan strode in, flanked by guards, and in his hand he held a scroll. "By order of Princess Elara Valen," Rowan announced, his voice cutting through the stunned murmurs, "we present evidence of treason." The hall fell into chaos. Gasps erupted as Rowan laid the letters before the assembled nobles. Kaelin's communications with Vera, his signature, his seal, his promises of betrayal. Kaelin's composure shattered. "This is absurd. Forged. Lies." Elara rose, her expression cool as winter steel. "Lies? Perhaps you've forgotten, Lord Kalen, that betrayal leaves fingerprints, even on the finest masks.
You dare accuse me?
I dare prove you false, she interrupted, her voice like silk over iron. You conspired to overthrow my family, to sell my kingdom to foreign hands. Your ambition ends tonight.
Guards seized him as he lunged forward, his fury boiling over into desperation.
You think you've won, princess? He spat. You've only delayed what's coming. The Varens will not stop. Elara stepped closer, her eyes cold and unflinching. Then let them come.
I will face them as a ruler, not a puppet.
As Kalen was dragged from the hall, silence fell. Then slowly, the nobles turned to Elara, not as a mere princess, but as their leader. Kaelric approached, his expression unreadable. You've done what many could not. Irinder stands because of your courage. She looked at him, her voice soft but firm.
And because of those who dared to stand beside me.
Their gazes locked, brief, dangerous, and full of everything unspoken. But even as victory settled over the court, Elara knew the game was not yet over. Kalen's final words echoed in her mind. The Varens will not stop.
Betrayal may have been conquered, but the storm beyond the walls had only begun to stir.
The morning after Kalen's arrest dawned grey and tense. A chill wind swept through the courtyards of Irinder Palace, carrying whispers of fear and speculation. The council chamber, once a place of policy and routine, now felt like a battlefield. Scrolls lay open across the table, maps marked with red ink, and messengers came and went in hurried silence. Princess Elara Valen sat at the head of the table, her crown set aside, her eyes sharp and unyielding. Overnight, she had become more than a princess. She had become the pillar that held Irinder together. But even victory had its price. Your Highness, General Rowan said, voice low and grave, our spies at the border confirm Kalen's words. Varen troops are on the move, disguised as trade convoys, heading toward our gates. Elara leaned forward, tension rippling through her. How long before they reach the capital?
3 days, perhaps less, Rowan replied.
They mean to strike while our court is still reeling from the scandal. Elara exhaled slowly. So Kalen was not bluffing.
His betrayal was merely the opening act.
Lady Seraphine, seated at her right, frowned. And the nobles are restless. Some still question your authority after last night. They must see not just a princess, but a ruler strong enough to command loyalty. Elara nodded.
Then they shall. She rose from her seat, the motion drawing the eyes of every council member. If Vera intends to march on Irinder, they will find we are not unguarded, nor unprepared.
General Rowan, secure the eastern gates and recall the border regiments. Lady Seraphine, summon the houses still loyal to the crown.
I will speak to them myself.
And me? A familiar voice asked from the doorway. Elara turned. Lord Kaelric stood there, dark cloak still dusted with the remnants of travel. I was wondering when you'd appear, Elara said coolly. You've been difficult to find. I was at the border, he replied. And what I've seen confirms the worst. The Varen king denies involvement, but his generals are acting without restraint. They mean to destabilize your rule.
Then tell me, Lord Kaelric, Elara said quietly, whose side are you on?
His gaze held hers, unflinching. Yours. Though I fear that may cost me my life. Later, in the solitude of her private chamber, Elara stared out at the horizon. Dark clouds gathered above the palace walls, a storm both literal and political. Kaelric entered quietly, as though sensing her thoughts. You shouldn't be alone, he said softly. I must be, she replied without turning. A ruler cannot afford to waver, not now. Even rulers are human, he said, stepping closer. You fought betrayal, exposed treachery, held your kingdom together when others would have fallen.
Yet you carry all of it alone.
Elara turned to face him, eyes glinting with restrained emotion. If I falter, Irinder falls. My family's legacy dies.
I can't allow that. Not for comfort, not for affection.
Kaelric's voice lowered, raw and sincere. You mistake affection for weakness. It's what gives strength meaning. For a moment, silence stretched between them, charged, fragile, undeniable. Then she said, almost a whisper, and if that affection is forbidden? Then perhaps it's worth fighting for, he murmured. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Elara stepped away, reclaiming her composure, but her heart beat faster than she wanted to admit. "Prepare the council for my address," she said. "If war is coming, we will meet it with unity. Vera expects a frightened princess. They will find a queen instead." Kael'ric inclined his head. "Then Arinder may yet survive. And so will you." As he left, Elara looked once more at the storm beyond the walls. The battle ahead would not only decide the fate of her kingdom, but also test the fragile balance between duty and desire. In the clash between loyalty and love, even a crown could become a burden too heavy to bear. The storm that had gathered over Arinder broke with fury. Thunder rolled above the palace spires as word spread. Vera's forces had crossed the border. From the war tower, Princess Elara Valen watched the distant fires along the eastern horizon. Even miles away, she could see the smoke rising like dark banners against the dawn. Her stomach twisted, but her expression remained unreadable. Fear had no place in a ruler's face. Behind her, General Rowan unfolded a map across the table, his tone grim. "Their army is larger than expected, well-armed and organized. Kaelin's influence ran deeper than we thought. But our border regiments have fortified the pass. We can hold if we strike first." Elara nodded, her mind already calculating. "And the nobles?" "Most have pledged their banners to your command," said Lady Seraphine. "Some still waver, but your public address has silenced many doubts. They see now who holds true power in Arinder." Elara exhaled softly. "Then it's settled. We defend the border and meet them head-on. If they expect a timid princess, we will show them a sovereign." Moments later, Lord Kael'ric entered the chamber, travel-worn and breathless. "The first skirmishes have begun," he said. "Your troops are holding the eastern ridge. But the Varen general commands from the rear. He won't stop unless we cut off his supply lines." Elara turned toward him, her eyes steady. "And how do you know this, Lord Kael'ric?" "Because he was once my commander," Kael'ric said, his voice low. "I know how he thinks, and how he underestimates his enemies." The council murmured, exchanging uncertain glances. Elara raised her hand for silence. "Then you'll lead the strike against the Varen supply chain," she said. "You know their tactics better than anyone." Kael'ric hesitated. "If I go, there's no guarantee I'll return. My name is still cursed in Vera. They'll call me a traitor to both kingdoms." "Then you'll do what I have done," Elara said. "Turn betrayal into power." Their eyes locked, a silent exchange between two people who understood sacrifice more deeply than most. Then, without another word, Kael'ric bowed and left. 2 nights later, the battle raged. From the eastern towers, flames painted the sky. Elara stood on the ramparts, armored in silver and blue, her banner snapping in the wind. Reports arrived one after another. The border holding, the troops rallying under her command. But one message made her blood run cold. Kael'ric's unit had gone silent. General Rowan urged her to stay within the safety of the palace, but Elara's decision was instant. "Prepare my horse," she ordered. "If he's not returned, I ride to the front myself." "Your Highness, that's madness." "It's leadership," she cut in. "Arinder will not follow a ruler who hides behind stone walls." The battlefield was chaos, smoke, steel, and screams. Yet even through the haze, Elara moved with purpose. Her banner rose high, a beacon for her soldiers. "Hold the line," she shouted. "Arinder stands with me." Morale surged. Warriors who had faltered now fought with renewed fury. In that moment, she was not just a princess. She was the storm itself. Through the carnage, she found him. Kael'ric lay near the broken ridge, bloodied but alive, surrounded by fallen enemies. She dismounted and knelt beside him, her hands trembling as she pressed against his wound. "You're a fool," she said through clenched teeth. "You were supposed to return." His eyes flickered open, a faint smile forming. "You came for me. I knew you would." Elara's heart tightened. Around them, her soldiers closed ranks, forcing the Varens to retreat. Victory rang through the fields, hard-won and costly. By dawn, the fires had dimmed, leaving the sky streaked with ash and gold. The Varen army had fallen back beyond the border, defeated. Elara stood at the ridge beside Kael'ric's stretcher, gazing at the ruined horizon. "The war is over," General Rowan said behind her. Irinder is safe. You've done what no ruler before you could. But Elara said nothing.
Her gaze was fixed on the man beside her, broken yet still alive.
Kaelric stirred weakly.
You saved the kingdom, he murmured.
She shook her head softly. We saved it.
Together. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the storm quieting around them.
She had fought with fire, ruled with iron, and loved in secret. And though the crown weighed heavy, she wore it with unshakable grace.
The throne room of Irinder, once a symbol of peace and prosperity, now carried the heavy air of aftermath. The banners still hung, the marble floors still gleamed, but every echo of footsteps reminded Princess Elara Valen that victory never came without cost.
Outside, the city celebrated. Bells rang, children waved the royal crest, and the people sang of their princess who had led them through fire and shadow.
But within these walls, Elara faced a different kind of war. One fought not with swords, but with words, loyalty, and deception reborn.
Your Highness, said Lady Seraphine, bowing low. The council awaits your decision on Lord Kaelric's fate.
Elara's hand froze over the document she had been reading.
His fate. Seraphine's voice was careful, diplomatic. The council believes that, as a Varen by birth, he cannot remain within the royal court.
They fear he may still be a danger, or worse, a spy whose love blinds your judgment.
The words hit harder than Elara expected.
He bled for this kingdom, she said quietly. He risked everything to save Irinder.
Yes, Seraphine agreed softly, but politics rarely reward sacrifice. They reward control. Hours later, Elara found herself standing before the grand balcony, overlooking the city that now chanted her name. The cheers below felt distant, hollow. Kaelric stood behind her, his shoulder bandaged, his expression calm but wary.
So, he said, voice low, I hear I'm the next threat to your crown.
You're no threat, she said, turning toward him. But they will make you one.
They fear what they can't control, and what they can't understand.
He took a step closer, the space between them electric.
Then what do you understand, Elara?
Her breath caught at the sound of her name, stripped of titles, stripped of distance. I understand that loyalty is not born of borders, she said softly. That you've done more for this kingdom than half its nobles combined. He smiled faintly, but there was sorrow in his eyes.
And yet they'll never accept me.
You know that. I can change that, she said, almost pleading.
You could, he admitted.
But at what cost? You fought too hard to wear that crown. Don't let love be the reason they take it from you. That night, the council gathered once more.
Elara entered the chamber with the poise of a queen, though her heart felt heavy with the weight of choice.
Lord Kaelric Dorn, she began, her voice echoing through the hall, stands accused of divided loyalties. Yet without his knowledge, his courage, and his sacrifice, none of us would be here today. Murmurs rippled through the nobles. Some bowed their heads in agreement. Others exchanged wary looks. Elara continued, her tone steady as steel. He is not an enemy of Irinder. He is a man who stood with us when betrayal surrounded us.
And for that, he has my trust and my protection.
She paused, then looked directly at Kaelric, seated at the far end of the chamber. However, I also understand the fear that grips this court. So, in the name of peace, and for the good of both kingdoms, Lord Kaelric will return to Vera as our envoy. His duty will be to rebuild the alliance that others sought to destroy. Kaelric rose slowly, meeting her gaze. He knew, as she did, that this was both mercy and exile.
Later, in the quiet of the palace gardens, he found her waiting beneath the moonlit archway.
You chose wisely, he said softly. Even if it means losing me. Elara's voice trembled, though she fought to keep it steady. I didn't choose to lose you. I chose to protect what we both built. He reached for her hand, his fingers brushing hers, a fleeting connection that felt like forever. You've become the ruler you were meant to be, Elara. Strong, unshakable, and heartbreakingly human. She managed a faint smile. And you've become the reason I know what strength truly means. For a moment, neither spoke.
Then, as the wind whispered through the gardens, he bowed, not as an envoy, not as a subject, but as a man who had given his heart to a queen who could never keep it.
Until our paths cross again, he said quietly. Until then, she whispered back. As he disappeared into the night, Elara stood beneath the stars, her crown gleaming like tempered fire. Victory had come, but so had sacrifice. And in that balance, between love and power, heart and duty, she found her reign's true beginning. The dawn that followed was quiet. Too quiet for a kingdom that had just survived the storm. The air was still, the banners unmoving, and the great city of Arinder seemed to hold its breath. From her balcony, Queen Elara Valen, no longer merely a princess, looked out over her realm. The golden light touched the spires and battlements, the market squares and gardens below, as though blessing a new beginning. Yet in her chest, peace felt fragile, like glass waiting to shatter. It had been 6 months since the war ended. 6 months since she had sent Ceolric away. She told herself every day that she had done the right thing. That duty had demanded it. That her heart could bear the silence he'd left behind. But at night when the world slept, she still heard his voice, quiet, steady, unwavering, reminding her that even queens were allowed to feel. The council had changed under her reign. Fewer whispers, fewer daggers hidden behind smiles. Lady Seraphine now served as her chancellor, and General Rowan commanded the army that kept Arinder safe. But stability, Elara knew, was an illusion. "Your Majesty," Seraphine said one morning as they reviewed dispatches, "our scouts at the Varen border report unusual movement. Not an army. Envoys, perhaps. And one name among them." Elara glanced up sharply. "Whose name?" Seraphine hesitated. "Lord Ceolric Dorne." The quill slipped from Elara's fingers. Ink bled across the parchment, spreading like a shadow. "He's returned." "It seems so. Officially, he carries a treaty, one drafted by the Varen court, requesting trade and peace. But I suspect his true reason for coming is less political." Elara's pulse quickened. "Have him escorted to the palace." "Of course," Seraphine said with a faint smile. "Though I suspect he won't need much escorting. He seems to find his way to you easily." That evening, when the palace was lit by 1,000 candles, he came. Ceolric entered the great hall dressed not in armor, but in the deep blue of Varen nobility. He looked older, more composed, but his eyes when they met hers were the same. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing low. "Lord Dorne," she replied, keeping her voice measured. "You return to Arinder under a flag of peace. I trust Vera's intentions are sincere." "They are," he said. "Vera has seen the futility of war. They seek trade, alliance, and forgiveness." Her gaze softened slightly. "Forgiveness is not easily granted." He smiled faintly. "Nor easily asked for." There was a pause, long enough for every watching noble to sense the undercurrent between them. Elara dismissed the court soon after, claiming private business with the envoy. When the hall finally emptied, the weight of formality lifted like a veil. "You shouldn't have come," she said quietly once they were alone. "I promised I would," he replied. "You didn't think a border or a crown would stop me, did you?" Her lips curved into a wry smile despite herself. "Still reckless. Still loyal," he countered. "And still in love." The words hung in the air. Dangerous, forbidden, but utterly true. Elara turned away, though her heart raced. "You can't say that here. Not now." "You know what it would mean." "I know exactly what it would mean," he said, stepping closer. "But I've seen what happens when truth is buried for too long. You built this kingdom on courage, Elara. Don't let fear rule your heart." She faced him then. No crown, no armor, only the woman beneath. "You left me with duty and silence. What do you expect me to do now?" He met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "Forgive me. Or stop pretending you ever could." Silence filled the room, broken only by the flicker of candlelight. Elara's hand trembled slightly before she reached for his, not as a queen granting mercy, but as a woman reclaiming what she had once denied herself. "For 6 months," she said softly, "I convinced myself I didn't need you. But every night when I looked at this crown, I remembered who helped me earn it." Ceolric's voice was rough. "Then let this crown be what unites us, not what divides us." Days later, the royal decree was issued. Arinder and Vera would enter an era of peace, sealed not by force, but by unity. And in the great hall where once betrayal had flourished, the people of 2 nations gathered as their queen stood beside the man who had once been their enemy. No speeches were made. No proclamations shouted. Only a single truth remained, that strength and love, when forged through fire, could remake a kingdom. The queen who had risen from betrayal now ruled with fire, wisdom, and a heart that no longer feared its own truth. The morning air in Arinder was crisp, the sky painted in pale gold and rose. Bells tolled softly in the distance. Not for war, not for mourning, but for renewal. It had been 1 year since peace had been signed between Arinder and Vera. Trade flourished, cities prospered, and for the first time in decades, the borderlands bloomed instead of burned. Yet peace, Elara knew, was a fragile jewel. One that gleamed brightest before it cracked. From the balcony of the High Council chamber, Queen Elara Valen watched the bustling capital below. Farmers in new caravans entered through the eastern gates, merchants shouted from the square, and banners bearing both kingdoms' crests fluttered in the wind, the golden phoenix of Arinder and the silver stag of Vera intertwined. But behind her, the whispers had returned. "Your Majesty," said Lady Seraphine, stepping into the chamber, her voice careful. "The High Council demands assurance that your union with Lord Kaelric will not compromise Arinder's sovereignty." Elara turned slowly, her crown gleaming in the morning light. "Sovereignty," she repeated, the word sharp. "Did we lose sovereignty when Kaelin betrayed me? When our nobles turned against their own crown? No, Seraphine. What threatens sovereignty is fear disguised as loyalty." Seraphine bowed her head slightly. "You speak truth as always. But the council fears perception. They remember that Kaelric once served our enemy. Some even whisper he guides your decisions." Elara's lips curved into a thin smile. "If wisdom guides my decisions, then perhaps they should thank him." At that moment, the chamber doors opened. Kaelric entered, his presence commanding yet humble, dressed not as a warrior, but as a statesman. He bowed to the queen, but his eyes met hers with quiet warmth. "Your Majesty," he said, "the Varen delegation awaits your word. They've brought news that may trouble you." In the great hall, the Varen envoys knelt before the throne. Their faces were pale, their eyes uneasy. "Elara of Arinder," said the eldest, "the Varen king is dead. His son has taken the throne, and he rejects the peace treaty. He demands tribute, or he will march on your lands again." A murmur rippled through the court. Elara rose slowly, her expression unreadable. "So history wishes to repeat itself," she said quietly. Kaelric stepped forward. "I know the new king. Eric Dorn. My brother." A tense silence fell. Seraphine's eyes narrowed. "Then this was always your plan? To place one Valen queen and one Dorn king on opposite thrones?" Kaelric's jaw tightened. "No. Eric has always despised me, for choosing peace over power. He means to undo everything we've built." Elara's gaze hardened, the fire in her eyes unmistakable. "Then we do not beg for peace. We protect it." That night, she stood in her war room once again. Maps spread before her, markers moved by steady, decisive hands. But this time, she wasn't the frightened princess who once watched her world crumble. This was a queen forged through betrayal and rebirth. Kaelric joined her quietly. "You don't have to face this alone," he said. She looked up, meeting his gaze. "You taught me that peace demands as much strength as war. I won't let your brother's ambition destroy what we've built." He reached for her hand. "Not in comfort, but in solidarity. Then we'll face him together. Not as queen and envoy, but as equals." Her lips curved faintly. "As fire and steel." Days later, a single message was sent to Vera, sealed with Elara's personal crest. "To King Eric Dorn. The crown of Arinder bows to no man. Cross our border, and you will find not a wounded kingdom, but a queen who has risen from betrayal, and will burn the world before she kneels again." The story of that letter spread across both kingdoms. Some said the new Varen king hesitated for months before answering. Others whispered that Kaelric himself rode to confront his brother, and that what passed between them was not recorded in any book. But in the end, war never came. Peace endured. And in the years that followed, songs were sung not of conquest, but of fire and crown, of a queen who turned betrayal into power, and a love that turned kingdoms from enemies to allies. In her later years, when she stood upon the balcony once more, Elara often thought of the girl she had once been. Naive, trusting, untested. She smiled faintly. "You were broken once," she whispered to the wind. "But you learned that power is not cruelty, and love is not weakness." Behind her, Kaelric's voice, older now but still steady, spoke softly. "And that legacy, my queen, will outlast us both." Elara turned to him, eyes bright. "Not legacy. Kaelric. Hope." They stood together as dawn broke, the phoenix and the stag rising above the city that had once been their battlefield. For kingdoms may burn and crowns may fall. But love, when born from truth, becomes the flame that never dies. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more original novel stories. And stay tuned, our next story is coming soon.